Are you not entertained? Because you're certainly not being educated. Here are some of the places where Gladiator shaded the truth in the name of drama, spectacle, and of course, entertainment. In the opening scene of Gladiator, we see two armies lining up for a pitched battle in a forest. The Romans are unnervingly calm and organized. Maximus makes a stirring speech, the siege weapons are locked and loaded, and the butt-kicking commences.
At my signal, unleash hell.
But something's not right. Siege weapons are called siege weapons because they're used in sieges, where an army surrounds a fortified city and lobs projectiles over or into the walls in an effort to wear down the occupants over a series of days or weeks or even months. In real life, the Roman army wouldn't have been dragging siege weapons around for use in a pitched battle, especially in a forest. According to the Romae Vitam, weapons like catapults and ballistae, which granted do look pretty awesome while pummeling the enemy with burning arrows and flaming cannonballs in that opening scene, were not used in the field, and were especially not used in forests where their effectiveness would have been greatly reduced. But hey, we viewers need something to help us understand the total badassery of our protagonist, so okay, let's just pretend. Maximus, Gladiator's protagonist, is a fictional character. According to World Heritage Encyclopedia, he might be sort of loosely based on a historical personality named Claudius Pompeianus, a Syrian who married Marcus Aurelius' daughter Lucilla, and who Aurelius might have once considered as a pick for the next Caesar. There was also a historical Claudius Maximus, a philosopher and politician who also served as Marcus Aurelius' teacher. He's not a super well-known character and was only mentioned a few times in the classical sources, not nearly enough to suggest a role in a plot to save Rome.
I will kill Commodus. The fate of Rome, I leave to you.
Pretty much everything the fictional Maximus does in the film is also entirely made up. There's no evidence that Claudius Pompeianus ever plotted against Commodus, and neither one of them went on to become a gladiator. But that's also forgivable. The intent of the film was more to provide a sense of the era, and that can be accomplished with a made-up story populated by made-up characters. But the devil is in the details. Marcus Aurelius was a real person, and so was Commodus. The former ruled Rome from 161 to 180 AD, and he was indeed a wise man who often put the needs of the Roman people above his own, just as he's depicted in the film. And he wasn't a fan of gladiator spectacles. In fact, he was so horrified by a lion that had been trained to eat human beings that he refused to look at it when it entered the arena. Some sources say he even placed restrictions on gladiatorial games, such as requiring combatants to use blunted weapons so they wouldn't kill each other.
Will I be known as the philosopher, the warrior, the tyrant?
He didn't, however, ban the games as depicted in the film. The economy at the time was kinda crappy, and what better way to distract people from the fact that their lives were difficult than to offer them a violent spectacle? So while Marcus Aurelius may not have loved the games, he was savvy enough to understand that they worked in his favor.
The people will be starving in 2 years. I hope they're enjoying the games because soon enough they'll be dead because of them.
Here in the West, we're not down with the whole emperor thing. Therefore, if you're going to paint a royal person as noble, you have him waxing poetic about the importance of voting.
Give power back to the people of Rome and end the corruption that has crippled it.
But Marcus Aurelius wasn't pining for the days of the Republic the way he's depicted in the film. In the years before his ascension, there'd been a trend towards selecting a successor from a list of qualified candidates, rather than simply handing power to the eldest son, which is better than a hereditary title, but still a pretty long way from democracy. And Marcus Aurelius was actually the first emperor in more than 80 years to deviate from that new tradition by choosing his son Commodus as his successor. There's no evidence at all that Marcus Aurelius, who was himself an emperor, disliked or wanted to abolish the position of emperor. Such plans would have been nonsensical for a guy who's clearly thinking about naming a successor. How do you make sure your character is universally loathed by your audience? How about giving him a physical attraction to his own sister? Because the historical Commodus' actual deeds were clearly not enough to disgust his viewers all by themselves.
Have I missed it? Have I missed the battle?
So yeah, filmmakers did that, and there's not much basis for this little plot gem either. Some historians speculate that Lucilla was jealous of Commodus' wife, but because of her social position, not because of who she was married to. Lots of people disliked Commodus, so if the whole sister love thing had any basis in fact, you bet they would have written it down. But it's not there, so writers could have spared us the ick factor in favor of the other despicable things Commodus actually did. In the filmmaker's defense, maybe some people would be okay with making dwarfs fight in the arena and covering disabled people with mustard and presenting them as banquet dishes. They weren't actually eaten, but it's still pretty awful. But everyone is most definitely not okay with a dude who's into his own sister. So ick it is. Thanks, writers.
You will provide me with an heir of pure blood so that Commodus
but his progeny will rule for 1,000 years.
Let's see, how else can we make the audience hate Commodus? How about if we have him kill his own father?
You will not be emperor. My powers will pass to Maximus.
Yeah, that didn't happen either. Commodus was pretty despicable, but killing his dad would have been pointless, since the real Aurelius had every intention of making him emperor. At the age of 13, Commodus joined his father on campaign and officially became a man. By the age of 16, he was a consul, and basically served as co-emperor alongside his father until the age of 19, when Aurelius died and the throne was passed to him. He didn't have to worry that he wasn't going to succeed his father because he'd been groomed for it for practically his entire life. So how did Marcus Aurelius really die? Most sources just say natural causes, though there is some speculation that he may have died from Galen's plague, an epidemic that began in 164 that some scholars believe was actually smallpox. What we do know is that he wasn't smothered to death by his own son. That would almost certainly have made it into the history books. Clearly, the film version of Commodus is pretty awful. He kills his dad, he lusts after his own sister, and he's just an all-around not super nice guy. As an audience, we don't have any trouble disliking him, mostly because of all the fictional crimes that have been attributed to him.
It vexes me. I'm terribly vexed.
But here's a funny thing, Commodus was even more awful in real life. No one needed to invent any fictional crimes for him because he had plenty of actual non-fiction crimes that the casual viewer could use to conclude that, yes, this guy was super extra not very nice.
Or I shall strike down those dearest to you. You shall watch as I bathe in their blood.
Among his many notable evil deeds, that time he dressed up a bunch of disabled people as mythological monsters and then had them all massacred in the arena. Eventually, Commodus got tired of doing all that emperor stuff and handed the government over to his cruel and incompetent buddies while he went around chariot racing, fighting shirtless in the Colosseum, and executing people. He told everyone he was Hercules reborn. He renamed all the months after some aspect of his imagined awesomeness, and he ordered the Colossus of Nero's head replaced with his own. Dude was a whack job, and no one needed to see him committing incest and patricide to understand that. Roman gladiators were sort of like human versions of racehorses. It's tempting to compare them to illegal fighting roosters or dogs because they fought each other for the entertainment of spectators, but like a racehorse, a human being is a lot more expensive to train and prepare than a rooster or a pit bull.
Gladiators, I salute you.
Roman gladiators were athletes, not sacrificial lambs. They weren't free, but the people who owned them, called lanistae, valued them and spent a lot of money on their training and upkeep. If gladiators only had a 50-50 chance of survival every time they went to work, then it wouldn't have been a very lucrative business, unless you were lucky enough to own the one guy that no one could ever manage to beat. And if that was you, you'd have a mighty difficult time finding another owner willing to pit one of his best guys against yours. There might be the occasional fight to the death just to get spectators worked up, but that always came with some extra compensation for the lanistae. Most of the time, gladiators would fight until one of them was clearly beat. Then they'd both go home and lick their wounds. No one is saying that being a gladiator was like being a modern-day pro wrestler, but it wasn't necessarily a deadly profession either. Maximus's name is all messed up too. In the arena, Maximus announces himself as Maximus Decimus Meridius, which doesn't fit the normal Roman naming convention. In Rome, people had at least 3 names. Their given name, like Bob, which came first, followed by the family name, like Smith, which came second, followed at the end by a nickname, which was used to distinguish you from family members with similar names, like the Great or something.
You do have a name.
My name is Gladiator.
But Maximus seems more like a nickname since it means the largest, and Meridius means from the south, and Decimus sounds more like a given name. At some point in the script, the name Alias is used, which could be a family name, but everything is all out of order. Really, Maximus's name ought to be Decimus Alias Meridius Maximus, not Maximus Decimus Meridius. So filmmakers were either dumbing it down or they genuinely had no idea how Roman naming conventions worked. Commodus liked to fight in the arena. In fact, he liked it so much that was pretty much his only duty as emperor towards the end of his life. But Commodus was never really in any danger in these fights, since he entered fully armed and battled opponents who were carrying wooden weapons. So the idea that he might have died in the arena is patently ridiculous. In fact, everyone hated Commodus so much that he met his end in much the same way as a lot of other unpopular historical figures. He was assassinated. According to History of the Roman People, the straw that broke the gladiatorial tiger's back was his plan to move into gladiatorial barracks, kill 2 consuls, and name himself as sole consul. At least that's what the rumors said. Anyway, everyone was pretty fed up, including Commodus's mistress, Marcia, who poisoned his dinner on December 31st, 192. Unfortunately, the conspirators' plans were ill-timed because Commodus got so drunk during the end-of-the-year party that he threw up most of the poison, so they had to send in a guy to strangle him while he was recovering in the bathtub. Maximus doesn't get a happy ending, but hey, at least Lucilla does, right? Well, in real life, Lucilla doesn't get to be all regal over the body of her slain brother and his enemy, because when Commodus finally got what was coming to him, she'd already been dead for quite some time. According to the Ancient Rome Handbook, a historical guide for travelers, the real Lucilla had a pretty sordid romantic life. Early on, she was forced to marry her uncle, though to get technical, he was Marcus Aurelius' adopted brother. After the death of her first husband, she married one of her father's generals.
Do you think me heartless?
I think you have a talent for survival.
After her father died, Lucilla started plotting against her brother. Her reasons aren't super clear, but some sources think it was because she knew how unhinged he really was. She got her son-in-law, who was also her lover, in on a plot to assassinate Commodus, but the plot failed, the conspirators were exposed, and Lucilla was exiled to the island of Capri. Commodus was way too paranoid to be satisfied with mere banishment, though, and he had her assassinated the same year. So no happy endings for anyone, except for all of Rome when Commodus was finally dead.